Kara Collins dropped her coffee all over the front desk on her very first day as a temp receptionist at Caldwell & Rowe, and of course, the phone rang at that exact moment. "Great," she muttered, trying to dab the puddle away with a handful of tissues while reaching for the receiver. "Caldwell & Rowe, this is Kara speaking. How can I help you?" There was a pause. Then a voice, deep, smooth, and just a little amused, answered. "Is it standard procedure to sound out of breath when answering calls?" Kara froze, heat rushing to her cheeks. "Only when I'm multitasking, sorry." "First day, coffee versus desk coffee 1. A low chuckle came through the line. "Noted, I'm calling for Mason Caldwell. I'll transfer you right now." One moment, she hit the wrong button and disconnected him. She stared at the phone in horror, then whispered to herself, "Oh my God." You just hung up on a client, on day 1. Before she could spiral any further, the phone rang again. She snatched it up. "Caldwell & Rowe, Kara speaking. You hung up on me." "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I hit the wrong button. Please hold. I promise I won't hang up this time." "No need." "I already know he's not in. I just wanted to hear your voice again." She blinked. "What? I'm joking. Relax, sort of." A pause. "You're new, huh? Clearly. I like it. You've got fire." He paused again, then said, "Tell me your name again." "Kara, I'm Roman Caldwell." Her heart tripped. "Caldwell? As in the Caldwell in Caldwell & Rowe?" "Oh," she said. "Hi, wow, sorry again." "Don't be. You made my day more interesting. Let's see if you survive your first week." And with that, he hung up. Kara stared at the receiver, her heart racing. It was just a phone call, nothing important. Just the founder's son. No big deal. Except it kind of was. By the time Friday rolled around, Kara had answered that same deep voice 3 more times. Once for a meeting reschedule, once to pass a message, and once just this morning he'd called and asked her if she liked tiramisu. "Tiramisu," she'd repeated, confused. "Just answer the question." "Sure, yes, it's delicious." Noted. An hour later, a small white box had been delivered to the front desk. Inside, a perfect slice of tiramisu from the Michelin-starred Italian place across the street, with a little note that said, "For surviving the first week." She couldn't stop smiling all day. She hadn't seen him. Not once. He was always on calls or traveling or locked in meetings. But somehow the voice on the other end of the line had already gotten under her skin, and apparently it was mutual. The following Tuesday, as she was organizing the mail trays, a warm voice said behind her, "You didn't spill anything today, did you?" She turned and came face to face with him. Roman Caldwell, tall, broad shoulders under a tailored navy suit, shirt unbuttoned just enough to show a bit of collarbone, dark hair, sharp jawline, and eyes that locked on hers with so much confidence it made her forget how to speak. "You're Roman." "You're Kara," he grinned. "Nice to finally meet you in person." Yeah," she tried to remember how words worked. "Hi, I was just heading out, but I wanted to put a face to the voice." He glanced down at the mail tray. "And make sure you haven't caused another spill disaster." "I've grown," she said, trying to match his energy. "I'm a whole new person now." His smile deepened. "Good, I like that." He left, but not before brushing his hand briefly against hers as he took a folder from the counter. It was the lightest touch, but her skin tingled for minutes afterward. The next day he came back, and the day after that. Sometimes he had a reason, a file to pick up, a meeting down the hall, but sometimes he just leaned against the edge of the counter and asked how her day was. "How long is your temp contract?" he asked one morning. "Just 4 weeks." That's not enough." "Enough for what?" He didn't answer. Just smiled and handed her a croissant from the bakery 2 blocks over. "You like almond, right?" She stared at it. "How did you know?" "You told me last Tuesday." She hadn't realized he'd been paying attention. By the end of the 2nd week, every woman in the office had noticed the way Roman lingered at the front desk. Kara tried not to read into it, but when he casually invited her to lunch that Friday, her heart had nearly exploded. They walked across the street to a rooftop restaurant. She'd never been there. It was reservation only, and she always assumed it was out of her league. But Roman just said, "Table under Caldwell," and they were seated immediately. Over grilled sea bass and sparkling water, he asked her about her life, her family, her favorite movies, her dream vacation. He laughed when she told him she once tried to learn fencing because she was obsessed with old pirate movies. "You're full of surprises," he said. "So are you," she replied. He drove her back to the office in a black Maserati. She tried not to gawk at the leather seats or the soft music playing in the background. That weekend, she couldn't stop thinking about him. By Monday, she was counting down the minutes until she saw him again. But Roman didn't show. Not Monday. Not Tuesday. On Wednesday morning, she finally asked the executive assistant, "Hey, do you know where Mr. Caldwell is?" "He flew to Zurich Monday morning," the assistant said. "Big contract renegotiation." Of course, she told herself to focus. It was just a flirtation, nothing serious. Roman probably flirted with half the city. He was a millionaire, he could have anyone. But that didn't stop her heart from sinking every time the front doors opened and it wasn't him. Then, Friday morning, he walked in, straight to her. "I miss this desk," he said, grinning. "I missed this coffee-stained corner too," she replied. He laughed. "Come with me." "What? I want to take you to lunch. It's 9 in the morning. Then breakfast." She hesitated. "I'm working." "I already cleared it with HR. You've got the next 2 hours." He held out his hand. And somehow, without thinking too hard, she took it. They stepped outside into the sunlight, and Kara tried not to think about how fast this was moving or how fast her heart was racing. She had no idea what she was getting herself into. But she had a feeling she'd already fallen into something dangerous, and thrilling, and maybe, just maybe, real. The elevator doors slid closed behind them with a soft chime, and Kara found herself standing in the middle of a penthouse suite that looked like it had been plucked from the pages of an architecture magazine and dropped 30 floors above Manhattan. Floor-to-ceiling windows bathed the space in soft morning light. A fireplace flickered beneath a marble mantel, and a glass wall opened onto a terrace with a view that made her knees wobble. She could just make out the spires of St. Patrick's Cathedral in the distance, elegant and constant against the pulse of the city. "I thought we were going to breakfast," she said, hugging herself. Roman slid off his coat and tossed it onto a sleek leather chair. "We are, I just didn't say where." She turned to him slowly. "You brought me to your place. Technically, the company owns it, but yes." He moved into the open kitchen and pulled 2 mugs from a cabinet. "Relax, I'm not trying to impress you with the view." "You're definitely succeeding, though." He glanced back at her, then smiled faintly. "I wanted 2 hours without anyone interrupting. I wanted to hear you speak without phones ringing or lawyers hovering." He set a mug in front of her. "And I make a mean espresso." She eyed the silver machine gleaming on the counter. "That thing looks like it could launch a rocket." "It nearly could. Sit." She obeyed, settling on a velvet stool at the counter while he worked the machine with practiced ease. The scent of dark roast filled the air. She watched him move precise, focused as if this moment deserved his full attention. "So," he said, passing her the cup, "what would you be doing right now if you weren't stuck behind a desk at Caldwell and Rowe?" She took a sip, surprised at how smooth it was. "Running interviews." "I'm a freelance journalist. Or I was. Things dried up after the magazine I worked with folded. Temping's just a way to stay afloat until something else comes through." He leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "What kind of stories?" "Profiles. I like people, real people. Their failures, their messes, what keeps them up at night. Everyone has a story worth telling." Roman's brow lifted slightly. "So why haven't you asked me any questions yet?" She tilted her head. "Because I'm not working." "And because you're the kind of person who only answers what he wants to." His mouth curved. "That's not wrong." Kara set her cup down. "What about you? You're not what I expected." He raised a brow. "What did you expect? Someone colder, stricter, less human?" "That's fair," he said. "I've spent years building a reputation that keeps people at arm's length. You're the first person in a long time who didn't seem to care about the weight behind my name. I didn't even know who you were at first." "Exactly." He stepped closer. "That's why I keep showing up at that desk." Her heart stuttered. He didn't touch her. just stood there watching her with a quiet intensity that peeled back something inside her. She stood, suddenly needing space. "You said 2 hours," she said. "You planning to cook, or was the espresso the whole meal?" "I had something delivered." He pressed a button on a panel near the kitchen and a concealed door opened, revealing a tray already laid with covered dishes. She blinked. "You planned all this?" "I plan everything." They sat by the windows, digging into warm croissants, eggs with truffle shavings and fresh fruit. Kara tried not to look impressed, but every detail from the linen napkins to the quartz cutlery reminded her she was in a different world. Roman poured her orange juice. "Do you have anyone, family, partner?" She hesitated. "My dad died when I was 12. Mom moved to Arizona a few years ago. I've got a younger sister in grad school, but it's just me out here," he nodded. "No boyfriend, not anymore." He didn't like that I worked late and didn't want to move in unless I gave up writing. So, smart girl for walking away. "What about you?" she asked. "Any secrets I should know?" His gaze didn't waver. "Plenty, none I'm ready to hand over." She finished her juice, then leaned back. "You know this doesn't make sense, right? You're this, and I'm a temp who can't afford rent without a roommate." Roman stood and walked to the windows. "I spent years surrounded by people who said all the right things, but none of it meant anything. Then you spilled coffee on day one and told me off without knowing who I was." She joined him, the city stretching out beneath them. "And that was enough." "It was honest," he said quietly. "I don't get much of that." They stood in silence for a long beat. When he turned to her again, there was something different in his eyes, less guarded, more certain. "I'm not good at casual," he said. "I don't do slow. I don't have time for games." "I wasn't offering any. I know. That's why I'm telling you this now." He reached into his inner coat pocket and pulled out a small, square envelope. He handed it to her. She opened it and blinked, an invitation. Black and gold, her name written in neat calligraphy. "What is this?" "There's a charity gala tomorrow night. Formal, press will be there. My family will be there. I want you to come with me." Her jaw almost dropped. "Roman, I know it's fast. You don't have to say yes, but I want you there." She looked down at the card, then up at him. "Why me?" He didn't hesitate. "Because I can't stop thinking about you. And because when I walk into that room, I want the person beside me to be the one who makes the world fall away. That's you." Kara's heart thundered in her chest. He didn't touch her, didn't press, just waited. She looked out at the skyline again, then back at him. "Do I get to pick the dress?" "No," he said. "I already did." When she stared at him, stunned, he added, "It's being delivered tonight. I took a guess on the size. The shoes, too. If they don't fit, I'll have someone fix it." She let out a breath that caught halfway. "You don't do anything halfway, do you?" "Not when it matters." And somehow she knew he meant that, every word of it. The boutique's door opened before Kara even knocked. A woman with sleek black hair and a clipboard stepped aside, motioning her in. "Miss Collins, right this way. Mr. Caldwell's instructions were very specific." Kara stepped inside, heart thudding. The boutique was empty except for her, no assistants bustling around, no other customers. Just silence, soft music, and gowns displayed like art beneath crystal lighting. She swallowed hard. The woman led her to a private dressing suite at the back, where a single garment bag hung on a brass hook above a velvet chaise. Next to it, a pair of satin heels rested on a low glass table beside a velvet box. "Take your time," the woman said, disappearing without another word. Kara unzipped the bag carefully. The dress shimmered like candlelight, champagne-colored silk with delicate beading across the bodice and a long, sweeping train that looked like something from a dream. The heels were the same shade, impossibly elegant. In the velvet box, she found a necklace simple but clearly expensive. A single drop diamond on a fine chain. She stared at it, stunned. Roman hadn't just guessed her size. He'd guessed her taste. And somehow, he'd gotten everything exactly right. The gala was held at a private estate on the Upper East Side, the kind of place where chandeliers lit the driveway and photographers lined the entrance, flashes sparking like fireworks. Roman met her at the car. his tuxedo so flawlessly tailored it made her momentarily forget how to breathe. "You look like trouble," he said, offering her his arm. "I feel like someone else." "No," he said, "you're exactly who you are, the rest of them just haven't caught on yet." Inside, the space glowed with gold and ivory. A string quartet played on a raised platform beneath an arched ceiling, and the guests were the kind that appeared in headlines rather than phone contacts. Kara kept her spine straight, her chin up, her fingers curled around Roman's arm like it was the only thing anchoring her. "You're doing fine," he whispered, guiding her toward a table near the center. "Better than fine, they're already watching." "Who?" He didn't answer. But when she glanced up, she saw them, the glances, the whispered comments, women in gowns that cost more than her rent. Men who looked like they'd inherited entire cities. Roman leaned down. "This is the part where you pretend not to notice." She forced a smile. "Am I supposed to charm them? You're not here for them." Then he kissed her cheek deliberately, slowly. Her skin burned from it. She barely had time to recover before a tall woman in a navy gown approached. Her hair was swept into an elegant twist, her lips painted a precise red. "Roman," the woman said, eyes flicking to Kara. "You didn't mention you'd be bringing someone." "I didn't know I had to clear my guest list," he replied evenly. The woman ignored the jab. "I'm Roman Caldwell, Roman's stepmother." Kara extended her hand. "It's nice to meet you." Vivienne's handshake was cool. "You're the receptionist, aren't you?" Kara blinked. "I'm a temp, yes." Vivienne's smile didn't touch her eyes. "How refreshing." Roman's jaw tightened. "Vivienne, don't." "I'm just saying," she replied lightly. "It's good to see you branching out." "I think we're done here," he said. Vivienne's smile grew sharper. "Of course, enjoy your evening." She turned and swept away. Kara exhaled, her pulse hammering. "Wow, she thrives on control," Roman said. "And she hates surprises. You didn't tell her about me." "I didn't tell anyone about you." Kara studied him, then stepped closer. "Why? Because this is real," he said, "and I didn't want them to poison it before it even had a chance." She didn't reply. She didn't have to. Her hand found his, fingers lacing. He led her through the rest of the night with quiet precision introductions where necessary, a few dances beneath the chandeliers, a trip to the terrace when things got too loud. And always, his hand stayed on her back, steady and warm. But it wasn't until they were alone again back in the car, city lights flickering past the tinted windows, that the silence thickened. "You okay?" he asked. She hesitated. "I don't belong in that world. You belonged in that room more than half the people in it. They think I'm a joke. They don't know you." She looked out the window. "But they know you, and they're going to use me to get to you." He didn't respond right away. "Then let them try." She turned to him. "Why are you doing this?" "I've spent years building walls," he said, voice low. "And somehow you walked straight through them without even trying. I don't care what anyone else thinks." She studied his face in the dim light. "You're not afraid of a scandal." "I've survived worse than whispers." She didn't know what that meant, but the weight in his voice told her not to press. That night, when he walked her to her door, he didn't try to come inside. He just stood there, hands in his pockets, looking at her like she was the only thing that made sense in the world. "I meant what I said," he told her. "This isn't a game, I know. If you want out, now's the time." She stepped forward, heart pounding. "I don't." He nodded once, then leaned in and kissed her, not rushed, not aggressive. Just a kiss that said everything he hadn't said aloud yet. When he pulled away, she stayed still, eyes locked on his. "Good," he said. "Because I'm not letting you go." Then he turned and walked down the steps, disappearing into the night, and Kara stood there, heart trembling, knowing everything in her life had just shifted. Kara sat cross-legged on her bed the following morning, staring at the velvet box Roman had handed her the night before they left the gala. She hadn't opened it then, too overwhelmed by everything else, the weight of the stairs, Vivienne's razor-edged words, and Roman's touch on her back that had felt more like a shield than anything else. Now, in the early morning light filtering through her apartment window, she lifted the lid and found a delicate gold bracelet nestled inside. Simple, understated. But engraved on the inside in tiny, almost imperceptible script were the words, "No masks, no walls." Her fingers brushed the etching. She didn't know when he'd had it made or how he'd known those words would hit her so hard. But they did. Before she could spiral into another round of overthinking, her phone rang. She answered, already knowing who it would be. "I figured you'd open it this morning," Roman said. "I did," and she hesitated. "No one's ever given me something that quiet before." "That was the point." He paused, then added, "I want you to come with me today. There's something you should see." "What kind of something?" "You'll find out when we get there." By the time she stepped into the waiting car parked at the curb, Roman was already inside. He was in a dark crewneck sweater and slacks this time, no tie, no suit, no armor. She slid in beside him, and he reached for her hand without a word. The car pulled away from Manhattan's noise and cut across the bridge before she could ask where they were going. Eventually, they wound up in a quiet stretch of Brooklyn. She didn't recognize a place where the skyline disappeared behind low brick buildings and trees just beginning to turn gold. Roman led her down a narrow street, past a mural-covered wall and a bakery with windows fogged from the inside. Eventually, they stopped in front of a modest building with a wooden sign overhead, the Elliott Foundation. She turned to him. "What is this place?" He held the door open for her. "Come inside." The interior was bright, warm, filled with laughter and the smell of paint and glue. Paper cranes dangled from the ceiling. A group of kids sat on the floor, surrounded by coloring books and puzzles. A woman waved from behind a desk, then returned to helping a child build what looked like a cardboard rocket. Roman stepped closer to her. "This place funds creative therapy programs for kids who have lost a parent. Art, music, writing, anything that helps them express what they can't say out loud." Everything inside Kara stilled. "You built this?" 10 years ago," he said, "after my father died." She turned to him, stunned. "I didn't know. Not many people do." His expression was unreadable. "My stepmother thinks it's a waste of resources. The board lets it exist because it's quiet and doesn't attract media, but I fund it myself. No press, no donors. Just the kids." A girl with braids and glitter on her cheeks ran up and threw her arms around his waist. "Roman, you're back." He crouched and hugged her tightly. "Hey, superstar, you finished that story you were working on." "I added a dragon," she said proudly. "Of course you did." "Can I read it later?" She nodded and darted off again. Kara watched him, something inside her cracking open. He turned back to her, voice low. "I didn't bring you here for sympathy. I brought you because I want you to know who I am when no one's looking." Her throat tightened. "You didn't have to show me this." "I did, because I'm falling in love with you and I didn't want it to happen with half-truths still between us." She barely heard the words. "You said falling, I meant it." He didn't touch her, didn't press. Just let the words hang there in the space between them. Kara's breath caught. "You don't even know if I'm staying." "Then tell me." She looked around at the colored paper, the crooked drawings, the girl with glitter still on her cheek, and then back at him. "I'm scared," she said honestly. "I am too," he replied. "But I think I'd regret walking away more than I'd regret trying." His jaw clenched, and something unspoken moved behind his eyes. "I want to stay," she said. "I want to see where this goes." Roman stepped forward then, cupped her face gently, and kissed her like a man who wasn't used to hope, but was finally letting himself believe in it anyway. Later that week, their lives shifted again. She was called into HR for what she assumed was the end of her contract. Instead, she was offered a position full-time, permanent, part of the firm's in-house editorial and communications team, a new department being built from scratch. "I didn't ask him to do this," Roman said that night as they sat on the rooftop of his penthouse, the skyline glittering behind them. "I know you didn't," she said, "but I also know you could have made it happen with one call. I gave them your portfolio. That's all. And they made a whole position. You earned that, not because of me, because you're good." She nodded slowly. "Then I'll take it." They sat in silence for a while, her head on his shoulder, his fingers tracing slow circles along her arm. I don't want to hide this anymore, he said. You mean us. I mean everything. I don't care what the board says or my family. I want the world to know you're mine, she smiled. Then show them. 3 nights later, at a black tie fundraising dinner for the firm's latest pro bono initiative, Roman stood at the podium in front of hundreds of executives, attorneys, and press. Kara sat at the front table, nerves coiled tight in her stomach. But when he reached the end of his speech, he did something no one expected. And lastly, he said, setting his cue cards aside, I want to thank someone who's reminded me that vulnerability isn't weakness. That honesty matters more than image. And that real love is worth risking everything. He turned, found her in the crowd. Kara Collins, you walked into my life by accident, but you stayed by choice, and I'm better for it. Every day. He stepped down from the podium and crossed the stage, stopping just in front of her. The room held its breath. Roman reached into his jacket and pulled out a small box, not velvet this time, but sleek, dark wood. He opened it. A ring, elegant, quiet, just like her. I'm not asking for forever tonight, he said. I'm asking for a beginning. Come live with me. Let's do this fully, openly, without walls. She stood, heart pounding, every pair of eyes in the room on her, and still all she saw was him. Yes, she whispered. Of course, yes. The applause was deafening. But all she felt was the way Roman pulled her close and kissed her, like the world had finally stopped spinning just long enough for them to catch their breath. 6 months later, Kara stood barefoot in their new home, a restored brownstone in Brooklyn, just 2 blocks from the foundation. Her office overlooked the park. Roman's jacket hung on the chair behind her desk. He walked in, hair tousled from the wind, and kissed the top of her head. Dinner, she turned and smiled. Only if you're cooking, I ordered instead. But I'll plate it nicely, she laughed, wrapping her arms around his waist. You're ridiculous, I'm in love, and she was too completely. Irrevocably. She'd taken a temp job at her reception desk, thinking it was a way to make rent. She never could have imagined it would lead her to this. To him, to everything. Kara stood barefoot in the small garden behind the brownstone, a trowel in one hand and a smear of soil across her cheek. The late spring sun filtered through the budding branches overhead, casting mottled shadows across the patio stones. A soft breeze stirred the leaves, carrying the scent of basil and lavender. From the kitchen, Roman's voice drifted out, low and melodic as he spoke to someone on the phone. She didn't catch the words. He was handling something for the firm, something high-level and technical, but even from here, his tone was calm, assured. It still amazed her how easily he toggled between that world and this one. She knelt beside a raised planter, gently pressing a new tomato seedling into the soil, and smiled at the absurdity of it all. A few months ago, the idea of planting vegetables in a garden owned jointly with Roman Caldwell would have sounded like fiction. Now, it was just a Tuesday. Are you trying to become a farmer? Roman asked from behind her. She turned to see him leaning against the doorframe, sleeves pushed up, a dish towel slung over one shoulder. His hair was mussed in a way that only happened when he ran his hand through it too many times during conference calls. Just making sure we don't starve if your next board meeting goes sideways, she replied. He stepped closer, crouching beside her. We could always survive on your risotto. You only say that because you don't want to admit I'm the better cook. He leaned in, brushing a kiss over her temple. I admit nothing, she nudged him with her elbow. How'd the call go? They signed. Zurich's expanding the partnership, which means more late nights for me and a bigger legal team. Sounds like you'll need someone to write all your internal memos, she teased. He pulled her into his lap, dirt and all, and wrapped his arms around her. I already hired someone better. She's brilliant, has a thing for pirate movies. She laughed, tilting her head back against his shoulder. Do they know we live together now? They do. And no one's quit yet. She turned in his arms, suddenly serious. Are you sure this is what you want, all of it, me, here in every part of your life? He brushed a thumb along her jaw. There's not a single part of my life that doesn't feel better with you in it. They stayed like that for a while, the quiet broken only by the rustle of wind and the occasional honk from the street beyond. When the sun dipped lower, casting golden light across the garden, Roman stood and reached for her hand. "I have something to show you," he said. She followed him inside, wiping her hands on a towel. He led her upstairs to the spare bedroom they'd never furnished, the one they kept saying they'd turn into a guest room but never got around to. The door was open, and the room was no longer empty. A small writing desk sat in the corner, flanked by a pair of bookshelves already filled with her favorite titles. On the wall above the desk, a framed page from her very first published article hung beside a photograph of the two of them on the terrace of the Elliott Foundation, surrounded by children and crayons. Kara stepped inside slowly. "You did this. I figured it was time you had a space of your own." Somewhere quiet, her fingers brushed the edge of the desk. "This is perfect." He moved behind her, looping his arms around her waist. "There's something else." She turned to face him. Roman took a breath. "I called your old editor last week." "The one from the magazine that folded." Kara's brows rose. "Why?" "Because she's launching something new, digital but backed by a major publisher. She didn't know how to reach you, but she remembers your work. She wants to talk." Her mouth fell open. "Roman, I didn't push. I just gave her your number. The rest is up to you." She blinked hard, her throat tightening. "You didn't need to do that, I know, but I wanted to remind you that your voice matters, not just to me, to the world." Tears pricked her eyes. "I don't deserve you." He kissed her, slow and certain. "That's where you're wrong." Weeks passed in a blur of new routines and gentle discoveries. Kara took the job with the new publication remotely on her terms. She wrote from the desk he'd given her, often barefoot, with a mug of tea and the window open beside her. Roman's schedule remained demanding, but he always made it home for dinner, even if it meant bringing contracts to the table. They learned each other's rhythms. She found out he liked jazz when he couldn't sleep. He discovered she hummed when she edited, completely unaware. They adopted a cat from a shelter, a moody tuxedo named Hemingway who ignored everyone. Unless someone was having a bad day, then he appeared like a therapist in fur. One Saturday morning, as they wandered through the farmer's market near the park, Roman paused in front of a florist's stall and picked up a single white peony. He handed it to her without a word. She laughed. "What's this for?" "I wanted to ask you something." She raised a brow. "With a flower," he held her gaze. "Will you marry me?" The words landed softly but with weight. No crowd, no stage. Just them, standing in the sun between crates of fresh peaches and jars of honey. She stared at him, the flower trembling in her hand. "Are you serious?" "I've never been more." She didn't hesitate. "Yes," she said. He smiled, quiet, real, and kissed her, right there in the middle of the market. A month later, they stood in the same garden behind the brownstone. She wore a simple cream dress. He wore a dark blue suit with the sleeves rolled just enough to show the ink on his forearm, a barely visible tribute to his father, and the foundation they'd built in his memory. They exchanged vows under the archway Kara had wrapped with ivy that morning. Only a dozen people stood witness: her sister, his small team from the foundation, a handful of close friends, and the girl with glitter still in her hair who handed them the rings. As they kissed, the first notes of music drifted into the air. Not a quartet. Just a single violinist Roman had found on the subway one night and hired for the day. Kara rested her head against his chest as they swayed among the flowers, the cat curled under a chair nearby. "I never imagined this," she whispered. Roman kissed her hair. "Neither did I. But I'm never letting it go." And he didn't. They built a life that was quiet in its confidence, rich not in extravagance but in meaning, the kind of life where love wasn't a performance but a presence, steady, certain, unshakable. Years later, when Kara published her first book, a memoir of stories collected from the children at the foundation, Roman sat in the front row of the launch, holding a copy in one hand and her fingers in the other. The plaque outside the brownstone read, "Caldwell and Collins. Not a law firm, a home. A beginning, and always a love that never asked her to change only to stay.